It started with a coffee. That was all I wanted to buy, and my own card was declined. How does a 68-year-old widow manage to drain her entire retirement account overnight? The truth is, I did not do it, but I know exactly who did. And now, their cards are being declined, and they are furious. My name is Evelyn Hayes. I am 68 years old, a retired librarian, and I live a quiet life here in Portland, Oregon. Or at least, I thought I did. My quiet life shattered on a Tuesday morning, not with a bang, but with the beep of a payment terminal. I was standing in line at the Daily Grind, our local coffee shop. It is usually a small, pleasant part of my morning. The smell of roasted beans and the familiar hum of the espresso machine. I was next. Just a medium drip and one of those almond croissants, please. Jenna, I said to the young barista. She smiled, her piercings glinting under the track lighting. That will be $7.05. Ms. Hayes, she said cheerfully. I smiled back and inserted my debit card into the chip reader. The small machine churned for a moment longer than usual, then let out a sharp, unpleasant beep. Declined, Jenna said, her smile faltering into confusion. Oh, I said, a small puff of air escaping me. That is strange. Try it again. Dear, would you... I watched her tap the screen, and I ran the chip again. The line behind me, which had been a low murmur of conversation, suddenly seemed to go quiet. I could feel the eyes of the man behind me, the one in the bicycle helmet who always ordered something loud and complicated. Beep. Insufficient funds. Jenna read off the screen, her voice dropping to a near whisper. She looked at me with that awful, pitying expression the young sometimes reserve for the old, as if I were a confused, stray animal who had wandered inside. My face flooded with heat. I could feel the blush creeping up my neck, hot and prickly. Insufficient that simply cannot be right. The man behind me let out an exaggerated, impatient sigh. Come on, lady. Some of us have to get to work. My hands began to tremble. I fumbled in my purse, my fingers brushing against my keys, an old tube of lipstick. But I knew I had no cash. I rarely carry it. I am so sorry, I stammered, pulling the card from the machine. I will have to... Just cancel it, please. I turned away from the counter, from Jenna's look of pity and the impatient glares of the line, and hurried out of the cafe. The cool, damp Portland air felt like a slap against my burning cheeks. I did not stop until I was around the corner, leaning against the brick wall of the neighbouring bookstore. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This was impossible. My pension check, $3,500, was direct deposited yesterday, the first of every month, regular as clockwork. David, my late husband, had set it all up. It was always there. My fingers, still shaking, fumbled with the smartphone Mark and Sabrina had insisted I get. I found my banking app, but the password they had simplified for me was not working. Frustrated, I just called the 800 number on the back of the card. After navigating the automated hell of press 1 for your balance, I finally got a human. Thank you for calling Northwest Mutual Bank. This is Carl. How can I help you? Yes. Hello, I said, trying to keep my voice even. My card was just declined, and I know there is money in that account. My name is Evelyn Hayes. I gave him my social security number, my date of birth, my mother's maiden name. The silence on the other end stretched as he typed. All right, Mrs. Hayes, I have your account pulled up. His voice was professionally calm, detached. I show a current available balance of $12.50. The brick wall felt suddenly very cold against my back. What? That is impossible. I just received a $3,500 deposit yesterday. It should be nearly $4,000. I do see that deposit, ma'am, Carl said. But I also see several large transactions that cleared this morning. Transactions. What transactions? I have not bought anything but groceries. I could hear his keyboard clicking again. Let's see. There is one charge from Tech Electronics for $3,200, and then several smaller charges from a Belvi skincare totaling about $240. Tech Electronics, Belvi Skincare. I had never heard of those places in my life. I would not know what to do in a high-end electronics store. And I have used the same drugstore moisturizer for 20 years. I did not make those charges, I said, the words coming out small and thin. Well, ma'am, they were made with a card linked to your account. Card number ending in... He read off a set of digits I did not recognize. I do not know that card, I whispered. A cold, metallic fear began to creep up my spine, far worse than the simple embarrassment in the coffee shop. This was not a mistake. This was not a bank glitch. Mrs. Hayes, Carl said, his voice softening slightly. Are you saying these charges are fraudulent? Fraudulent. The word hung in the air, but as the fog of my confusion started to clear, a terrible, sickening image began to form in my mind. An image of a brand new, shiny camera lens. An image of tiny, expensive, colourful jars and bottles cluttering my bathroom counter. The fear did not just suffocate me. It solidified into a hard, cold knot of certainty in the pit of my stomach. I knew who had my money. That cold, hollow feeling in my stomach was not just about the money. It was the sickening realization of how it had happened, of how I had been so utterly, comprehensively blind. My mind slipped away from the damp Portland sidewalk, tumbling back 18 months, back to the silence. It had been 3 months since David's heart attack. 3 months of waking up alone in the bed we had shared for 45 years. 3 months of making coffee for one. Our house. The small suburban bungalow we had worked our whole lives to pay off had become an echo chamber. Every creak of the floorboards, every drip of the faucet, amplified the emptiness. The loneliness was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest until some days I found it difficult to breathe. I was a ghost in my own home, rattling around the rooms where we had raised our son, where we had grown old together. Then, Mark and Sabrina arrived, driving down from Seattle in a sleek, black car that still looked brand new. They were worried about me. Sabrina, my daughter-in-law, a woman who always seemed to be performing for an invisible camera, swept into the house ahead of my son. She was, as she always reminded us, a lifestyle blogger, whatever that meant. She rushed to me, pulling me into a hug that smelled strongly of expensive perfume. "Oh, Evelyn," she murmured into my hair, her voice thick with practiced emotion. She never called me Mom. "This house is just... it is so empty. You poor thing. All alone here. It breaks my heart." She pulled back, dabbing at the corners of her perfectly lined eyes, a picture of filial concern. Mark, my son, stood behind her, shifting his weight, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his designer jeans. He had David's height, but none of his backbone. She is right, Mum, he said quietly. It is just sad. That night, over the takeout they insisted on ordering, they laid the groundwork. Sabrina spoke in a low, conspiratorial tone, as if she were sharing a terrible secret. We have been having the most awful time in Seattle. Evelyn, she began, placing her hand over mine on the table. Our landlord is a monster, a complete tyrant. He is trying to evict us, Mark blurted out, looking down at his plate. Evict you? My heart seized. The idea of my son, my only child, being thrown out of his home was terrifying. Why, what happened? It is absolutely ridiculous, Sabrina scoffed, taking a delicate sip of wine. He claims we are violating the lease because I run my brand from the apartment. Can you believe it? He is just looking for an excuse to kick us out so he can raise the rent. He is treating us so unfairly. They painted a grim picture of predatory landlords and the impossible Seattle market. They were victims, trapped by circumstance. Then Sabrina leaned in, her eyes shining. And we were talking on the drive down, and we had this idea. It feels so right, does not it? Mark. Yeah, Mum, it does, he mumbled. Evelyn, she said, squeezing my hand. What if we moved in here with you? I just stared at her, the suddenness of the suggestion stealing my breath. Just for a few months, Mark added quickly, sensing my hesitation. Just to get on our feet, find a new place, save up a proper deposit without that monster breathing down our necks. We could help out, Sabrina chimed in, her voice bright. We could help with the bills, the groceries, and Evelyn. We could take care of you. You would not be alone anymore. Imagine it. We could have family dinners again. The house would be full. Full. The word echoed in the empty space around me. Full of life. Full of noise. The end of the crushing, deafening silence. I would not be the lonely widow. I would be the center of a family again. I would be needed. The relief was so sudden, so overwhelming, that it felt like gratitude. They were not just saving themselves. They were saving me. Yes, I said, the word coming out as a breath. Oh, yes. Of course. That would be wonderful. They moved in 2 weeks later, not with a few suitcases, but with a full-sized moving truck. Now, standing on the sidewalk, my bank account drained to $12.50. I finally saw that night for what it was. It was not an offer. It was an invasion, planned with perfect, predatory precision, aimed directly at the wound my husband's death had left behind. And I had held the door open for them. At first, it was everything I had craved. The terrible, oppressive silence of the house was gone, replaced by the sound of music playing, the low murmur of the television, and laughter. Mark and Sabrina filled the quiet spaces with their presence. Sabrina, in particular, was a whirlwind of energy. She reorganized my kitchen, declaring my spice rack hopelessly outdated, and cooked elaborate meals with ingredients I had never heard of. Mark, my quiet son, seemed happier than I had seen him in years, clearly basking in her attention. For those first few weeks, I felt a deep, profound gratitude. I was not a burden. I was a mother again. The shift was so subtle I barely noticed it. It began with the mail. I was sorting through the usual stack of catalogues and bills on the dining room table when Sabrina came by, placing a mug of tea beside me. Oh, Evelyn, what are you doing? She asked, her voice light and musical. She picked up the electric bill. You should not be stressing over all these complicated statements. It is all online now anyway. It is not complicated, dear, I said, a little defensively. I have been paying this bill for 30 years. I know, she said, patting my hand. But you have been through so much. Honestly, it is the least we can do. Let me handle this stuff. You just relax and enjoy your retirement. Mark and I have got this. Before I could protest further, she had scooped up the entire pile of envelopes. I will get all these organized, she announced. And just like that, she was in charge of my correspondence. A week later, she approached me while I was reading in the living room. She sat on the ottoman at my feet, her expression one of thoughtful concern. Evelyn, she began, I have been looking at all these household accounts, and it is a logistical nightmare. A nightmare? What do you mean? Well, we are all using water and electricity and the internet, and we are all eating. I have been putting the groceries on my credit card, and then you pay the utilities, and Mark pays for takeout. It is just messy. It is impossible to track who owes what. I had not thought of it that way. It just felt like a family sharing a home. I was thinking, she continued, it would be so much simpler if we just had one family account. You know, a central pot. We all put our share in, and all the household expenses just come out of it. Clean, easy. No one feels like they are borrowing from anyone else. It sounded logical. It sounded modern. I am not sure, I began. David always handled the bank accounts. That is exactly my point, she said, her voice soft with sympathy. You should not have to learn all that confusing stuff now. We can set it up so it is completely automated. Your pension goes in. We will contribute for our share, and everything is paid like clockwork. She smiled, a bright, confident smile that made me feel old and foolish for even hesitating. It is just for convenience, Evelyn, to make our lives easier. That evening, Mark brought it up. I was washing dishes, and he came to stand beside me, drying. Sabrina told me about her idea for the joint account, he said, not meeting my eye. Yes. What do you think? He sighed, placing a plate in the cupboard. I think she is right. Mum? She is really good at this stuff. You know, organization, finances. She handles everything for us. Dad is gone. And, well, you need someone to help look after this side of things. We just want to help you. He sounded so earnest, so much like my little boy wanting to do the right thing. The guilt was immediate. Here they were, trying to help me, trying to take a burden off my shoulders. And I was being difficult. I was being ungrateful. David had always told me I worried too much about things I did not understand. Maybe it was time to let someone else take the lead. All right, I said, drying my hands on a towel. If you both think it is best, we can do it. The next day, Sabrina drove me to my bank, the same bank I had used since I opened my first savings account. She was a picture of efficiency, explaining to the nice young man at the desk exactly what we needed. My mother-in-law wants to add us to her primary checking account to help her manage her household finances. The young man printed out the forms. So, you will be adding Mr. Mark Hayes and Mrs. Sabrina Hayes as full joint owners. That means all three of you will have equal access to the funds, including deposits and withdrawals. Exactly, Sabrina said, clicking her pen. I hesitated. Full joint owners, I thought it was just for paying bills. I looked at Mark, who was standing by the window, staring at the traffic. Sabrina, dear, I am not sure. Evelyn, she said, her voice dropping, a slight, almost imperceptible edge of impatience in it. We are in a hurry, and the man is waiting. It is just a signature. It is to help you. Embarrassed, I took the pen. I saw where to sign. Evelyn Hayes. I thought of the empty house. I thought of their laughter. I thought of not being alone. I signed the papers, adding my son and his wife to the account that held my entire life, my pension, my security. I signed it all away for the promise of a full house. The house was still full of noise, but it was no longer my noise. I began to feel like a lodger, a guest in the home David and I had built. My routines were the first things to go. My quiet mornings reading in the living room were replaced by Sabrina's loud video calls, which she took by the big window, pacing back and forth, describing skin creams to an audience I could not see. Mark was often on the sofa, immersed in the glow of the massive new television they had mounted on the wall, the sounds of explosions and gunfire filling the air. I found myself retreating to my bedroom, the one room they seemed to ignore, just for a moment of peace. The changes in the kitchen were the most jarring. I went to make my usual cup of chamomile tea one afternoon, but the box was gone from the pantry. Oh, I forgot to buy more, Sabrina called out when I asked, not looking up from her phone. The next week, when I put it on the grocery list, she sighed, a small puff of manufactured exasperation. Evelyn, that imported brand is just too expensive. We are trying to budget. Remember, budgeting. It sounded so responsible. Yet, the refrigerator door, once home to my skim milk and cottage cheese, was now crammed with bottles of pale orange wine I could not pronounce. The cheese drawer overflowed with artisanal, wax-wrapped cheeses that smelled like damp earth. These are for my networking, Evelyn, she would explain, sensing my gaze as I navigated around them to find my butter. You have to spend money to make money in the lifestyle industry. It is about building a brand. My $10 box of tea, apparently, did not factor into the brand. My old, reliable sedan became their car. It started slowly. I just need to pop out for a meeting with a potential partner, Sabrina would say, jangling the keys she had taken from the hook by the door. It looks more professional than an Uber. Soon. Her partner meetings seemed to last all day. My weekly library trips, my one real outing, stopped. My appointments with the doctor became a logistical negotiation. Can you take a bus? Evelyn, I really need the car today for a shoot. The light is perfect. I, who had driven myself for 50 years, was suddenly stranded, reliant on the city bus schedule or their begrudging availability. I was becoming smaller, confined first to my house, then to my room. About 6 months into their stay, Sabrina announced another brilliant simplification during one of her kitchen takeovers. Evelyn, it is just too confusing having you use the main account for your little purchases, she said, stirring something thick and beige in a pot. It messes up my spreadsheets. She gestured to the counter, where a crisp, new envelope from the bank sat. I had the bank issue this for you. I opened it. Inside was a new debit card, identical to mine, but with my name on it. It is a supplementary card, linked to the main account, she explained, as if to a child. I have put a $200 spending limit on it for the month. That should be more than enough for your coffee and books. Right. I stared at the card. It was my money, my $3,500 a month pension, and I was being handed an allowance, a $200 limit. I felt the same hot flush of shame I had felt that first day at the bank, but this time I was in my own kitchen. I took the card, my hand trembling slightly. I did not say anything. What could I say? I had agreed to this. I had signed the papers. The real moment of clarity, the one that pricked through my fog of denial, came with the bank statement. Sabrina usually whisked the mail away before I saw it, but this one had arrived on a Saturday, and I had gotten to the mailbox first. I locked myself in my bedroom and opened it. My eyes scanned the columns of withdrawals, wine clubs, expensive clothing stores I had never heard of, and one charge. A single charge for $470 at a restaurant downtown called the Ember Room. My stomach tightened. I had not been to the Ember Room in a decade. David had taken me there for our 40th anniversary. When Sabrina returned, I confronted her in the hallway. I held the statement out, the paper shaking in my hand. Sabrina, what is this? $470. She glanced at it and laughed. It was a light, tinkling laugh, as if I had just told a silly joke. Oh, Evelyn, you forgot already? She asked, her head tilted. Your memory really is going, is not it? Forgot what? The party Mark's birthday, I told you all about it last week. We took some of my influencer friends out to celebrate. To network for Mark, I specifically mentioned we were going to the Ember Room. I stared at her. My blood ran cold. Mark's birthday was not for another 5 months. There had been no discussion of a party. There had been no celebration. It was a lie. A bald, effortless lie, delivered with a smile and a look of pity for my failing memory. She took the statement from my hand. Do not worry your head about it. It was a business expense. Really. It is all about the content. That night, I did not sleep. I listened to the sounds of my home, their laughter, the low bass of their television, and I felt a coldness I had not felt since the day David died. But this was not grief. It was rage. I got out of bed and went to the desk in my room. I found a small, spiral-bound notebook, the kind I used to use for library notes. I opened it to the first page. I wrote down the date. I wrote the Ember Room, $470. I wrote Mark's birthday is in August, not March. I did not know what I was going to do, but I knew I could no longer trust my own home. I could not trust my own son. I had to trust the ink. I had to write it all down. I had to have proof. And now, standing on the sidewalk, that notebook was miles away, but the proof was no longer just a suspicion. The voice of Carl, the banker, with his alien names Auratech Electronics and Belvi Skincare, was the final piece. The humiliation from the coffee shop was gone, replaced by a deep, icy terror. I could not go home. I could not look at them. Not until I knew precisely what they had done. I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere safe, somewhere that was still mine. The Portland Public Library, my branch. I had worked the reference desk there for 41 years. I knew its sounds, its smells, its secret, quiet corners. It was the only place I felt I could think clearly. I walked the 4 blocks, my legs feeling unsteady, and pushed through the heavy oak doors, the familiar, hushed scent of old paper, binding glue, and floor polish wrapped around me like a blanket. I felt my racing heartbeat slow, just a fraction. I bypassed the new releases and the main reading room, heading straight for the public computer terminals in the back. I sat down at a carrel, grateful for the high partition that shielded me from the few other patrons. My hands were clammy, but the shaking had begun to subside. It was being replaced by something else, a cold, methodical focus. Sabrina had simplified all my passwords, but I still had the recovery questions linked to my private email, an old account she knew nothing about. It took me 5 agonizing minutes, my fingers fumbling on the unfamiliar, sticky keyboard. I reset the password. I typed in the new one. I logged in to my bank account. And there it was. Not just Carl's voice on the phone, but the stark, black and white proof. Deposit. Social Security, $3,500. Withdrawal. Auratech Electronics, $3,200. Withdrawal. Belvi Skincare, $120. Withdrawal. Belvi Skincare, $85. Withdrawal. Belvi Skincare, $35. My entire pension. My food. My utilities. My existence for the month. All gone in a series of clicks. My available balance stared back at me, mocking me. $12.50. I stared at the largest charge, $3,200. It was a sum so large it felt abstract, unreal. I highlighted the name Auratech Electronics. I right-clicked and selected Search. The results loaded instantly. It was not a general store like Best Buy. The website was sleek, black, and filled with images of equipment that looked like it belonged in a movie studio. The tagline read, "Equip your vision. Elevate your content." My blood ran cold. Content. The word Sabrina lived by. I clicked on the Products tab. My eyes scanned the list. Professional mirrorless cameras, high-definition drones, studio lighting rigs, podcasting microphones. This was not a store for a hobbyist. This was a store for someone building a brand. A sick, terrible certainty settled in the pit of my stomach. I knew, but I needed to see it. It was the librarian in me. I required the primary source. I opened a new browser tab. I did not have an Instagram account, Sabrina had once told me, with a patronizing laugh, that it was too visual for me, but I knew her handle. She chanted it like a mantra around the house, spelling it out for her invisible audience. I typed it into the search bar. Her page was public. A grid of bright, filtered images of her smiling, posing with products, eating at expensive restaurants. The top post was new. It had been posted late last night. The timestamp read 10 hours ago. There she was, my daughter-in-law. She was posed against a clean white wall, grinning triumphantly. But it was not her face that held my attention. It was what surrounded her. In her hands, she held a large, complex black camera, its lens pointed at the viewer like an accusation. On a tripod beside her stood a glowing ring of white light, a professional silver microphone, the kind I had only ever seen in recording studios, sat on the desk in front of her. It was thousands of dollars of equipment. I leaned closer to the monitor, my breath fogging the glass. I read the caption. "Finally bit the bullet and got my new baby," she had written, followed by a string of celebratory emojis. "So excited to finally invest in my brand and take my content to the next level. Big things are coming. Ready to elevate." And beneath the text, the digital daggers blessed. Influencer life. New gear. I clicked back to the bank statement. Auratech Electronics, $3,200. I clicked back to her smiling face, Her new camera, her new lights, her new microphone. She had not just stolen my money, she had posed with it. She had celebrated it. She had called my pension the money David and I had scrimped and saved for my old age, my security and investment in her brand. I was not family. I was not a mother-in-law. I was an untapped resource. I was the angel investor she had been waiting for. And I had just been cashed out. I closed the browser windows, my hand moving with a sudden, sharp precision. The shaking was gone. The embarrassment was gone. The grief was gone. There was only a cold, hard, clarifying rage. I was not a victim anymore. I was a librarian, and I was going to do my research. I sat there, staring at the empty computer screen. The bright, filtered image of Sabrina's smile burned into my mind. I saw her holding the camera, my camera, bought with my money, ready to elevate. Blessed. A tide of heat surged up my neck, flooding my face. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a lapse in judgment or youthful extravagance. This was theft. It was a cold, calculated plundering of my life, orchestrated by my son and his wife under the guise of caring for me. They had seen my loneliness not as a vulnerability to be protected, but as an opportunity to be exploited. The humiliation I felt at the daily grind was a trivial sting. This was a mortal wound. I stood up. The librarian in me, the part of me that had been dormant for 18 months, took over. My hands, which had been trembling, were now perfectly still. I walked with a steady, measured pace from the computer carrel, past the biography section, to the small, glass-walled room in the corner designated for quiet phone calls. I stepped inside and closed the heavy door, sealing myself in the small, soundproofed cube. The silence was absolute. I took my phone from my purse. My fingers did not fumble as I found the number for the bank. I navigated the automated menu, pressing the keys with a hard, deliberate touch until a human operator answered. Northwest Mutual Bank. How can I help you? I need to speak to your fraud department. Immediately. My voice was not the reedy, uncertain voice of the woman in the coffee line. It was low, clear, and cold. There was a click, a brief burst of placid music, and then a new voice, this one sharp and professional. This is Maria with the fraud department. How can I help you? Ma'am. My name is Evelyn Hayes, I said. I am calling to report fraudulent activity on my checking account. I understand. Mrs. Hayes. Let me just pull up your file. Can you please verify the last 4 digits of your social security number? I gave her the information. I confirmed my date of birth and my mother's maiden name. I was not a confused old woman. I was a witness giving a statement. Thank you. Now, which transactions are you disputing? There is a charge for $3,200 from a business called Auratech Electronics. There are also several charges from Belvi Skincare, one for $120, one for $85, and one for $35. I did not make or authorize any of these purchases. I heard the rapid, precise clacking of her keyboard. I see those charges, Mrs. Hayes. They all posted within the last 12 hours. That is correct, I said. They are fraud. Understood, Maria said, her tone all business. We will open a formal dispute. The first and most important step is to secure your account. I am going to lock the card that was used for these transactions. That card ends in 4188. I paused. My card did not end in those numbers. Maria continued. Now, I also see your primary card, the one ending in 6229. Do you have that card in your possession? Mrs. Hayes. Yes, I said, thinking of the card in my wallet. The one that had been declined. Yes, I do. To be safe, I strongly recommend we lock that card as well, until we can issue you a new, secure one. Do you want me to proceed with that? Yes, I said. Lock it. Okay. That card is now deactivated. I heard more typing. And then she spoke again, and the world tilted. Mrs. Hayes, I see this is a joint account. There are 3 debit cards currently active. The card ending in 4188, which was issued to a Sabrina Hayes. The card ending in 6229, issued to you. And a third card, ending in 9035, issued to a Mark Hayes. Do you want me to lock all 3 cards linked to this account? The small, soundproof room suddenly felt airless. I leaned back against the wall, my hand flat on the cool glass. 3 cards. 3. They had not just been using my account. They had issued themselves their own. While I was being handed a $200 supplementary allowance card, like a child, they each held their own key. They had their own private access to my pension, my savings, my entire financial life. The family account was a lie. It was a holding pen, and I was the only one who did not have a key to the gate. The calculated deception of it was staggering. The betrayal was so deep it was almost invisible. Mrs. Hayes, Maria asked, her voice sharp, pulling me from the shock. Are you there? Do you want me to lock all 3 cards? A chill, one that had nothing to do with the weather, settled deep in my bones. It was the chill of a decision, absolute and final. I closed my eyes, and I saw Sabrina's hashtag, blessed. Yes, I whispered, but my voice was steady. Yes, lock them all. Lock every single one, right now. A heavy silence filled the small glass room. Maria, the fraud specialist, seemed to understand that I had just confirmed more than a simple transaction. The professional, crisp cadence of her voice softened. Mrs. Hayes, she said, her tone suddenly very gentle, almost quiet. I have initiated the fraud claim, and the accounts are now frozen pending investigation. But, given the joint nature of this account, if you feel you are in a difficult or unsafe situation, I want you to know that you have other options. What options? I asked. My voice was a low rasp. You said it is a joint account. They have access. They have access to that account. Maria corrected me. But there is nothing stopping you, Mrs. Hayes, from opening a new account. A completely separate, individual account. In your name only. An account they cannot see, cannot access, and cannot touch. A small, sharp breath of hope cut through the icy rage in my chest. How would that work, my pension? That is the most important part, she said, seeming to anticipate my fear. You can reroute your Social Security deposit. You just need to go to any branch, open the new account, and fill out a new direct deposit authorization form. We send it to the Social Security Administration. They update your file, and your next payment goes to the new, safe account. My mind was racing, calculating. My next payment. It is due soon, the 1st of the month. I heard her keyboard clicking again. Yes, the 1st is in 3 days. If you open the new account and submit the paperwork today, it will be very close. Mrs. Hayes. but it should be just enough time. The automated system usually updates within 24 to 48 hours. Thank you, I said. The words were small, but they carried the weight of my entire future. Thank you, Maria. I hung up the phone. I stepped out of the quiet call room, back into the familiar scent of the library. But I did not walk toward the exit that led to my bus stop. I did not walk toward my house. I walked out the side door, crossed the street, and waited for the number 12 bus, the one that went across the river to the west side of Portland, far from the trendy neighborhoods Mark and Sabrina favored. The journey took nearly 40 minutes. I watched my familiar city blur past the window, feeling like a fugitive. Every passenger who got on felt like a potential spy. My hands were clenched so tightly in my lap that my fingernails left half-moon indents in my palms. The bus finally let me off in a sprawling, anonymous suburb I had not visited in years. It was all new strip malls and chain restaurants. It was perfect. I walked into a branch of Northwest Mutual Bank that I had never seen before. It was all bright lighting and grey carpet, completely impersonal. I took a number and waited, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Ma'am, I can help you over here." I sat down across from a young woman whose name tag read Kendra. "I need to open a new checking account," I said. I had rehearsed my story on the bus. I leaned forward slightly. I am going through some very sudden family changes, and I need a private, personal account, just in my name, for my own security. It was the truth, just not the whole truth. Kendra nodded with a polite, professional sympathy, asking no prying questions. "Of course," she said. "We can certainly do that for you. Did you want to set it up with an initial deposit?" "Yes." I reached into my purse, into the small, hidden, zippered pocket where I kept what David used to call my runaway money. It was an old joke between us. I pulled out a single, crisp $50 bill I had put there years ago. $50. She took it, and the process began. I signed my name. Evelyn Hayes. Just my name. There was no line for a joint owner. There was no one to add. Then I looked at her. "I also need to change my direct deposit information for my Social Security." "Right, we can do that right here," she said, printing a form. I took the pen and filled it out. The new account number. The bank's routing number. My hands were steady. Every loop of my signature felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself. This piece of paper was not just a bureaucratic form. It was an escape hatch. "My next payment is due in 3 days," I said, sliding the form back to her. "Will this be processed in time?" She looked at the date. "Oh, yes. I will fax this to the Federal Processing Center right now. It should update within 1 to 2 business days. Easy." "Thank you," I said. She handed me a thin, pale blue temporary debit card and a book of starter checks. "Your permanent, embossed card will arrive in the mail in about 7 to 10 business days," she said with a smile. I looked at the flimsy piece of plastic. It had no name on it, just a long string of numbers. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. The bus ride home was a fresh kind of agony. I was a spy carrying a state secret. When I finally got to my house, it was quiet. I let myself in. I could hear Mark's video game, the sound of distant, electronic gunfire coming from the living room. Sabrina was probably upstairs, editing her photos, admiring her new baby. I walked, silently, on the runner in the hall, I went into my bedroom and, for the first time, I locked the door behind me. I opened my dresser, the bottom drawer, the one that held my slips and linens. In the very back, underneath a stack of nightgowns, was a small cedar box. It held the few silk scarves David had owned, the ones he wore when we went to the opera. They still smelled faintly of him. I lifted the soft, folded silk. I placed the new bank paperwork and the pale blue temporary card at the bottom of the box. I covered them with the scarves. I hid my new, secret life among the last remnants of my old one. I closed the drawer. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought they might hear it through the walls. But I knew, for the first time in 18 months, that I was going to be safe. They were in the living room, the space that had once been my quiet reading nook, now transformed into Sabrina's studio. The new lights I had seen on her Instagram post were set up, bathing the room in an artificial, shadowless glare that made the wallpaper look faded. Sabrina was on the floor, surrounded by packaging and boxes. Mark was filming her with her phone, while the new camera, my camera, sat glistening on its tripod, aimed at the scene. She was in the middle of an unboxing video. "Oh my God, honey, just look at it." She was gushing, holding a lens up to the light. "It is perfect, absolutely perfect. The low light capability on this. My channel is going to blow up. This is a total game changer." Mark murmured his agreement. "It looks really professional, babe." They had not heard me come in. I stood in the hallway, watching them. They were like children on Christmas morning, gleefully unwrapping stolen presents. The sight of her caressing the camera, the one bought with my $3,200, did not make me want to cry. It just cemented the cold, hard thing that was growing in my chest. "Oh, Evelyn?" Sabrina finally spotted me, her face bright and flushed with excitement, her influencer smile snapping into place. "You just missed it. We are unboxing the new gear." "I see," I said. My voice was calm, even. "Where have you been, Mum?" Mark asked, lowering the phone. "You were gone for hours." I looked at my son, his face open and unsuspecting. He was a fool, but he was a willing fool. "I was at the library," I said, the lie slipping out easily. "Meeting an old friend for coffee." It was a perfect inversion of the morning's disaster. "Oh, nice," Sabrina said, already turning back to her equipment. "That is good. You should get out more." I walked past them into the kitchen. The silence I left in the hallway felt louder than their chatter. I began to prepare dinner, my movements automatic, taking the chicken from the fridge, chopping onions, washing lettuce. Every sound, the knife on the cutting board, the sizzle of the pan felt amplified in the tense quiet of the house. I was a spy, performing the mundane tasks of my cover story. I could feel them in the next room, their energy high, buzzing from their new acquisition. We ate at the dining room table, another performance of normalcy. The food, usually a small comfort, tasted like ash in my mouth. Sabrina, naturally, did all the talking. She was planning her new content schedule, outlining videos, using words like engagement and monetization. Mark just nodded along, his eyes glued to her. I ate. I did not speak. Sabrina finally paused, picking at the chicken on her plate. "This is a little dry, don't you think?" "Evelyn?" she asked, not unkindly, but with the casual critique of someone in charge. "For 18 months. I would have apologized. I would have felt a small sting of failure. This time, I just looked at my plate. I nodded once. Yes, it is. I took another bite. The silence that followed was entirely different. It was heavy, and it was theirs, not mine. I could feel their eyes on me. I looked up and saw Mark and Sabrina exchange a quick, uncertain glance. My silence was a disruption. My agreement, my lack of defense, was wrong. It was not in the script. Are you okay, Mum? Mark asked, his brow furrowed. Perfectly fine, I said. Just tired from my day. I took my plate, which was still half full, and carried it to the sink. I think I will turn in early. I left them there, sitting at the table in the middle of their confused silence. I went to my room and locked the door. Sleep, of course, was impossible. The house was too quiet now. And then, not quiet enough. Through the wall, from their bedroom, I heard them, not arguing. Not yet. They were laughing. It was low, intimate laughter. The satisfied, secure laughter of people who had just gotten away with something wonderful. The sound of their contentment, their complete lack of guilt, was the final, twisting turn of the knife. I lay in the dark, my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. I felt the cold, pure rage settle over me, not hot and wild, but patient. It was a focused, quiet fury. They were laughing now, in my house, in my bed, spending my money. But I had a secret. I had a pale blue temporary card hidden with my husband's scarves. I had a new account, waiting. And the first of the month was in 2 days. The storm was coming, and they had no idea they were the ones in its path. I woke up the next day, after a night of deep, dreamless sleep. For the first time in 18 months, the rage had not kept me awake. It had quieted me, given me a singular purpose. I was no longer a victim waiting for the next blow. I was a strategist, waiting for the pieces to move into place. I went to the kitchen, made my coffee, and sat at the table. I took my phone from my purse, placed it on the table beside my mug, and did something I had not done since they moved in. I turned the ringer volume all the way up. The house was quiet for hours. Mark slept late, as he always did. Around 11 o'clock. Sabrina emerged from their bedroom, not in her usual leggings and sweatshirt, but in full armor. She was wearing a sleek, dark green silk dress I had never seen before, doubtless a recent purchase from Belvi Skincare's sister company. Her makeup was immaculate, her hair professionally blown out. She looked like a woman who was about to sign a major deal. She looked like a woman who had just invested $3,200 in herself. She floated into the kitchen, ignoring me, and grabbed a set of keys from the hook. My car keys. I cannot talk. Evelyn, she said, her voice bright and breathless. I have the most important lunch of my career. A potential sponsor. A huge brand. They reached out to me. Can you believe it? Where are you meeting? I asked. My voice a placid, neutral thing. The Ember Room, she said, naming the restaurant. The same one. The $470 lie. The audacity of it was almost impressive. She was returning to the scene of a previous crime to celebrate her most recent one. Well, I said, lifting my coffee mug to my lips. Good luck. She paused, looking at me, perhaps sensing the lack of warmth. But she was too wrapped in her own narrative to care. This is it. Evelyn, she said. This is where it all pays off. She was out the door in a cloud of expensive perfume. The house settled. I heard the muffled explosion sounds of Mark's video game starting up in the living room. He would be there for hours, lost in a digital world, oblivious. I sat in the kitchen. I did not read the paper. I did not wash the breakfast dishes. I just sat, and I waited. The clock on the wall ticked. 1 hour passed. The sounds of Mark's game became a low, monotonous drone of warfare. Then, at precisely 12:55 p.m., my phone shrieked. The sudden, loud ringtone blasted through the quiet house, making me jump. But my hand was steady as I looked at the screen. A text message from Mark. I tapped it open. Mom, Sabrina just called me. She sounds crazy. Her card was declined at the restaurant. She said the waiter tried it 3 times. Declined. I read the message. I imagined her. In that dark, expensive room. Her face. So perfectly made up. Beginning to crack. A second message dinged. Immediately after the first. She is totally freaking out. They just had the big sponsor lunch, and now she cannot pay the bill. They think she is trying to dine and dash. She is hysterical. What is wrong with the account? Is it a fraud lock? I looked at the words. Hysterical. Declined. Dine and dash. The shame? The public. Burning shame? I felt a cold, slow smile twitch at the corner of my mouth. I set the phone down on the table, face up. I did not type a single letter in response. From the living room, the sounds of the game abruptly stopped. The silence was sudden and heavy. My phone buzzed again, a long, angry vibration against the wood. Another text from Mark. Mom, I just tried to buy food on my app, my card. It was declined too. It says card locked. Another buzz, almost instantaneous. What is going on? Mom, call me. Call me right now. My phone began to ring, loudly, insistently. His face filled the screen. I looked at it. I watched it ring. Then, from the living room, I heard it. No. 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 What the? A loud thud, the sound of his gaming headset being thrown against the wall. Damn it! I heard his frantic footsteps on the hardwood floor, pacing back and forth. Mom! He bellowed, his voice cracking with a mixture of panic and rage. Mom! Pick up the phone, what did you do? I heard a loud, flat smack as his hand hit the living room wall. I sat in my kitchen, perfectly still. I listened to my son, my fully grown son, having a tantrum in the next room. The trap had sprung, and I knew, any minute now, the front door would fly open, and the other one, the humiliated one, would be home. I did not have to wait long. I heard a car door slam outside, a sound so violent it rattled the kitchen window. 10 seconds later, the front door burst open, slamming against the wall so hard I thought the plaster would crack. Sabrina stormed in, her face a mask of crimson rage, her perfect makeup ruined by tears of fury. She was not crying from sadness. It was pure, unadulterated humiliation. What did you do? She screamed. Her voice, usually so light and musical for her brand, was a low, guttural shriek. Mark was right behind her, his face pale and blotchy, his eyes wide with a childish panic. Mum, the cards are not working. None of them Sabrina's. Mine. They are all just dead. I stood up slowly from the kitchen table. My hands were perfectly steady. I faced them, the 2 people who had turned my grief into their personal bank account. I reported the cards stolen, I said. My voice was clear and strong. It echoed in the hallway. Stolen. Mark yelped, his voice cracking. What are you talking about stolen by who? By you, I said, my gaze locking onto Sabrina. They were stolen by you. The $3,200 for your new camera. Sabrina. The $240 for your Belvi skincare. The $470 at the Ember Room for a birthday party that is not for another 5 months. Mark's face went from pale to chalk white. He looked at Sabrina, his mouth hanging open. He had not known. He had not known the details. He had just gone along. That was a business expense. Sabrina shrieked, recovering quickly. She took a step toward me, her hands clenched. We are building a brand. You were our investor. You were supposed to be supportive. No, I said, and the word cut through her rant like a knife. I was not an investor. I was your victim. You lied to me. You gaslit me. You made me believe I was losing my mind, all while you were draining my retirement account. You ungrateful old woman, Sabrina finally roared, her mask of sophistication completely gone. She was ugly in her rage. We moved in here. We gave up our lives in Seattle. We took care of you. You were a pathetic, lonely old woman, and we gave you a family. And you charged me for it, I replied, the coldness in my voice making her stop. But I suppose I should be grateful. You taught me something very valuable. I looked past her, at my son, who was trembling. I don't know how you are going to pay for your dinner tonight, or your gasoline, or anything at all. Because that account, the family account, is frozen. It is locked down as part of a federal fraud investigation. You cannot do that? Mark finally whimpered, finding his voice. You cannot just turn it off. That is our money. Your pension is in there. This was the moment, the final, beautiful, terrible checkmate. My pension was in there, I said. As of this morning, my pension, every single cent of it, is being rerouted. It will be deposited tomorrow into a brand new account. An account that has only one name on it. Mine. The color drained completely from Sabrina's face. The rage was replaced by a dawning, sickening horror. She finally understood. You, she whispered, her eyes wide. You planned this. You set us up. You tricked us. I learned from the best, I said. I turned away from them and walked to the old telephone on the kitchen wall, the one David and I had always kept. I picked up the receiver. You have 24 hours to pack, I said, my back to them. I want you and your new camera and your designer clothes and your imported cheeses out of my house by noon tomorrow. You cannot just kick us out, Mark cried, his panic turning to bluster. We live here. We have rights. I turned back, the heavy receiver in my hand. And if you are not gone, I said, my voice dropping so low they had to lean in to hear it. I will be taking the last 18 months of bank statements, this little notebook I have been keeping, and this new case number for elder financial abuse, directly to the Portland Police Department. I wonder how elder abuse will look on your influencer brand. Sabrina. Mark looked like he was going to be sick, and Sabrina for the very first time since I had met her. Sabrina looked truly, deeply afraid. I put the receiver to my ear. Now, I said, get out of my house. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. Please let me know where in the world you are listening from in the comments below. I would love to connect and hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this, please be sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video. and hit that hype button so more people can hear this story.